Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'm your host, Joe Abadi. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. We've got some new segments that we've been working on. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them right now. We'll be starting with the starting line. Then we have a little segment called Why Not Try This? We've got the Moto Showcase, which is coming up. We'll be showing you a Greaves that I restored several years back. We've also got the Here's the Problem segment. This is where your questions and comments come in. We read them over the air. We put them up on the screen, and we solve some problems for the folks out there. We've also got the Viewers and Vendors segment tonight. We've got Robert Fish, a great guy from Facebook who's reproduced some amazing Yamaha parts. I've got him behind me. We're going to be zooming in with the camera in a little while. You'll be able to see what's happening there with Robert Fish and some of the great things he's been reproducing for YZs and ITs and MX Yamahas. Also, we'll have some announcements later on about some races coming up, things that you're really going to want to be interested in. But right now, let's get back to the starting line. It was once said that you should never write a letter when you're angry. Well, maybe you should never make a video while you're angry and put it on Facebook either. I did that yesterday. I was a little annoyed. I don't regret that I actually made the video and put it on Facebook because it prompted me to think about a few other things after I did it. The reason why I made the video was somebody had the balls to go on and send me a message about what they didn't like about my little ragtag show here, Vintage Motocross Q&A. They didn't like the parts on the back of the wall. They didn't like the sound of me drinking water. They didn't like this. They didn't like that. And I was a little annoyed by it, to tell you the truth. Then I looked at the person's name. The guy is a marketing analysis person. He's in charge of a lot of things in the motorcycle industry. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to say who he works for. But he is kind of high up there on the totem pole, and maybe his remarks about Vmxq&A, maybe they were right, but I just think they were delivered in the wrong way. But being he's so interested in critiquing something, maybe he'd like to critique a little something, a little show that we put together, and it's called American Motocross Restoration. American Motocross Restoration, of course, is a pilot that we shot several years ago. I would think, I'm going to call him Mark because he's in marketing. Okay, I would think Mark might be really interested in the the American Motocross Restoration pilot. I want to send him a copy of it because it really could use an executive producer. But being you're a numbers guy, Mark, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what one of the pages say in the business plan. This way you get a little better idea of what's going on. The majority of motorcycle owners can't identify with the youth-driven programming in distribution today, and advertisers in the $3.4 billion industry are looking for a way to speak to all ages in the emerging domestic market for motorcycles. This should grab you right by the horns. This is something where American Motocross Restoration would be a wonderful thing, a wonderful springboard for advertising people. There's nothing out there like that. Not Orange County Choppers, not any of these barber shows. There's nothing out there that people can really relate to, and there's not a place for aftermarket people and parts manufacturers to go to put their products out there. American Motocross Restoration would be a great place to do that. It'd be also a great place for product placement. The TV show premise is based on the fact that the average owner has several bikes in the garage and likes to do day-to-day service modifications themselves. By creating this show, we give the motorcycle industry a solid advertising platform for their messaging. Something else to think about. Most of those guys, when you look at Supercross or when you look at people watching some of these shows, the average guy in a Supercross, I would say, is 40 years old, 45 years old. There's 18 or 19 races a year. Those stadiums are filled. 40, 50, 60,000 people, plus more watching on television. The average guy, about 40 years old. Those are the guys that are spending the money. Those are the guys that have kids that are coming up on the minis. They're 14, 15 years old, 12 years old. They need a place to buy parts. They want to know more about parts. Not everybody's on Facebook. Not everybody's on social media. Not everybody buys magazines. A show like American Motocross Restoration would be the perfect place for something like that to happen. You know, from the moment we released the show, the treatment and the teaser, the industry had gone crazy for everything about it, including the logo and the brand. We went into production with the show in 2015, released it at the NAPD convention in Florida, which is the National Association of Television Producers and Executives. And the show was well received, really well. Most commonly, we were asked by distributors, how many years has this show been on the air? We've even had distributors, after they found out it wasn't on the air, want to sign with us or want us to sign up with them for worldwide distribution. Everybody was interested in it. We don't have an executive producer. Kevin Bridges and Penny Bridges were nice enough to put up some money, a good chunk of money, when this show first came out. We got it off the ground with their help. We're so grateful for them. Past that, not really much else happened. Dave Gaddy and I worked tirelessly on this show, editing, finding locations, putting a lot of times in weeks in an edit suite to edit this show. If you know anything about an edit suite, it's a very complicated set, shall we say. With computers and screens, you can adjust your video when you shoot a movie, when you shoot a video. You can change the lighting, the sound, a lot of things happen in there. It's a very expensive place to be. It's like $300 an hour, all right? Dave has an edit suite. We put a lot of time in there. What I'm saying to you, Mark, the marketing guy, I want to send you a business plan of American Motocross Restoration. I want you to take a look at it. Your arms are pretty long in the industry. You know a lot of people. I know you do. I want you to take a look at it and see if this is something you want to wrap your arms around. I'm looking for an executive producer. This thing's going to die on the vine if somebody doesn't grab hold of it pretty soon. Now, you and I may have gotten started off with a little tiff early on with about the set of Vmxq&A and things like that, and I made a video and I was a little wild in that, but who knows? I don't want to block the next blessing. I'm going to send you a copy of the business plan, a link to the video. You get a look at it. Maybe we could work some things out with that. Let's move on. Why not try this? I've got a little tip for you tonight. This isn't going to change you from a novice to an expert by any means, but I think it's something you're going to enjoy. And it's got a little something to do with a set of handlebars like this. And just for the sake of the video, I put a throttle on each side. A lot of times, after you're riding, you may crash, you have a problem like this. Your throttle tube gets broken, the end gets broken off. When you go to put it on, it sometimes goes past the handlebar. Your grip, being rubber, is going to rub against that. It's going to cause, it could cause your throttle to stick. It could cause a sticky throttle. It's just something you should really pay attention to. So what you may want to do is go out and buy yourself a new throttle tube that looks like this, that's got a cap on the end. This way, when you put your grip on, it's nice and clean on the end. The grip's not going to rub against the handlebar, and you're going to have a real nice, smoothly working throttle. One other tip I'd like to give you while I'm thinking about it. Sometimes you can go out and buy a pair of handlebars, new ones. Sometimes they're powder coated. Sometimes maybe bars are painted or anodized. What I like to do is put the throttle onto the end, and I mark where it ends here on the bar. I then take some sandpaper, clean off the end of the bar, get off the paint, maybe the anodizing, makes everything run a lot smoother. So when you put everything back together, you can lubricate it with your favorite lubricant on there, be it silicone or whatever it might be, you get a nice, smooth operating throttle. And that's my tip for today on why not try this. Our next segment, here's the problem. This is the segment where we take your questions, some of your comments. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the Moto Showcase. It's not, it's segment 3, the Moto Showcase. Correct, Jordan? All right, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, you know? Moto Showcase is something that I created for this show, and it was really created for you, the viewers. What I have encouraged you to do, and some guys haven't done it yet, is to send me a dozen pictures or so of your bike. It could be a restoration, it could be a show bike, it could be your race bike. It doesn't have to be anything special. Just send in something, 12 pictures of your bike. I like to put it up here on the screen, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how it might look with your bike up there. But when you put your bike on the screen, we're going to have a way for you to call in. We're going to have you live on here, and you and I are going to have some dialogue about it. But right now, what I want to show you is a 1967 Greaves that I restored several years ago for a wonderful guy named Tim Clark. And this Greaves was very special to him. He had one when he was a kid or a younger guy, and he wanted another one. Here it is. It was sitting in my shop when he gave it to me. We basically took the bike back down to the frame. Here's a shot of the countershaft sprocket, and you could see the grease and the wear and the tear that was on the bike. We stripped everything down, split the cases, cleaned everything out, and made it all look like new again on on the inside. Here's a picture of the crankcases too. And we put it all back together. The ignition's nice and clean. Put the cases back together. Everything was working real well. Here's a shot in my old shop where we were reassembling the bike. And some things that I learned on a Greaves. It was really a fascinating bike to work on. I want to tell you why for just a second. It was a motocross bike that was really before my era. It was almost before I was born, but not quite. Anyway, some of the finishes and the fit in this bike were really, really interesting, like the hardware, something I take a lot of pride in when I refinish a bike. On this bike, they weren't nickel, they weren't cadmium. They were, no, I'm sorry, they have a nickel finish, not cadmium and not zinc. So we took the time to do that, make everything look nice and original. It's got some little Zerk fittings down here on that big leading link front end. We had vapor blasted all the aluminum on it to make everything look really nice the way it should. Polished the hubs, had some new spokes, and this was an interesting story. This rim, I had to go down to Raber's in San Jose, which is a Triumph dealer, had a lot of English parts. He's recently closed. I had to go find rims for this bike. I couldn't find them anyplace. I went to Raber's, and as I was down there, there was an electrical failure. So I'm back in this section of Raber's lot, of Raber's building, with a flashlight looking for the rims for this bike. It took me like 7 hours. But I did find 2 of them. I was able to buy them. They say made in England on them. And we got the spokes and had everything put back together. And there was the finished product. So our Greaves is here in the Moto Showcase, but we would like to have your bike here in the Moto Showcase. So this week, maybe you can get some pictures sent in and we can get some things lined up for you, have you on the show, talking about what's going on with your favorite scooter. Next up, What's It Worth, I believe, is our next segment on the show. After the Greaves. What's It Worth? I saw an interesting thing last weekend. It was at the Barber Museum. They also had the Bonham motorcycle auction there. There was a 1970 Husky that was sold for a whopping $18,400. Here's a picture of the bike right here. Very well done. Restoration looked beautiful to me. Just, I think, really perfect in every way. It's a 1970 Husqvarna 250 Cross, and why it went for $18,400 was because it was owned by Bruce Brown, or it was given to him by Edson Dye, who was the distributor for Husqvarna at the time. Here's some paperwork that goes on with that, and so it did have some documentation. It did say in the auction listing that they can neither deny nor confirm that the bike was actually in the movie, which tells me that it probably wasn't. However, there is the paperwork that says that the bike was given to Bruce Brown. It is the bike that's in the picture that was sent off at the auction at $18,400. Now, I want to say something about that $18,400. If you go to buy a 1970 Cross 250 that's worthy of restoration, that's complete, I would say you're probably going to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500 to $3,000 for it, if it's a nice piece, but in need of restoration. The average restoration that I've learned over the past 15 or 18 years of being in the restoration business, average restoration requires about $3,000 in parts and outside services. So before you know it, you're going to be in that bike for $5,500, $6,000. I'm not going to say what my hourly shop rate is, but I can tell you it's far below average of going to a new motorcycle shop and having them work on your bike. Same thing goes for anybody who else is in the industry that may be doing restorations. But even if you found somebody for $60 an hour to do, and they're not going to do that kind of a job, I don't think. At $60 an hour for $100 for 100 hours, you're looking at $6,000 in labor. You're looking at another $5,000 between parts and the platform bike. You'll be at $11,000, $12,000 before you know it. So, $18,400, $6,400 more for a bike that was owned by Bruce Brown that has some history to it that may or may not have been in the movie On Any Sunday. We don't know. I don't think that was a bad price, considering what the bike is, how it looks, and the background of it. So that's my thoughts on What's It Worth. We'll be doing What's It Worth segments every week. Probably not bikes that are $18,400, but I'll be looking around. I'll be going to my page, Vintage Motocross Buyers and Sellers Price Guide. I'll be looking there. I'll be looking on eBay. Hey, if you guys have a bike that you recently sold and you want to share that information with us, I'd be happy to put your bike on there and we can discuss that. Our next segment, viewers.
Here's the problem.
Oh, no, no, no. We're going to go with here's...
You went right past.
I went right past here's the problem. And I went to what's it worth, huh?
Yeah.
Let's go back to segment 4.
There you go.
Here's the problem. The problem is I'm not reading my own format that I have in front of me on a board that's the size of a backboard to a basketball hoop. Here's the problem. This is the segment where we take your questions that you've sent me throughout the week. I read them back and hopefully I can resolve some things for you. The first question we have is from Cliff Whitestone. I have a 76 Honda CR250 with progressive shocks that are an inch too long. Can I buy a fork kit to lengthen the front? I'm in the process of restoring this bike. Here's the problem that I see with that, Cliff, and here's your bike. Yeah, the shocks are too long and you've got the back lifted up there. You mentioned in your question about getting a fork kit for the bike. Now, fork kits are something that came out in the 70s. Bikes had shorter travel. But here's where kind of the problem is with that. And I don't think it's a really good idea. A fork kit is going to raise it an inch. What it does is it adds an inch onto this damper rod at the bottom. By the time you put this back in here, there's an overlap of about 6 inches. So you're going to probably have a 5-inch overlap. You're going to lift the front of the bike up an inch, but you're not really gaining any travel. Understand why. This damper is still hitting the bottom of the lower tube. You're not changing anything. The spring is still in there and it's still going to move the same amount. You're making the fork longer, but you're not changing the travel. The only way to change the travel would be to add more to the top, put a longer spring. By the time you do that, you're going to go for more money than the whole thing's worth, or to put a whole different set of forks on the bike. You don't want to do that either. It's going to cost you too much money. It's not really worth the modification. The best thing to do is to invest the money in the right set of shocks for the rear of the bike. Sell the progressives, you'll get a decent buck for them. Go buy the right size shock for the back of your bike. You say you're restoring it. You're going to want it to look nice. That would be my suggestion. You got a great looking bike. I love the style of that bike, the 76 CR. I like the red frame. I like everything about it. Go for the right shock instead of investing money in something that really isn't going to give you what you want on the front end. I appreciate the question, Cliff. Thanks a lot. Let's go to the next one. I have an OSA Phantom with a leaky Bing carb. Should I rebuild the Bing or replace it with a Mikuni? Todd Brower. Well, you got a great looking bike there, Todd, number one. And I spoke to the West Coast vintage guru on OSAs, and that's Keith Linus from OSA Planet. And what Keith told me is that on most Bing carburetors, they're probably not set up right. It could mean a leaky needle. There could be some things with the float. But Keith says they're really not worth the effort to change over. The OSA is going to lose some of his magic if you put a Mikuni carburetor on it. Now, what I would do is I would look up Keith. I would look up Keith Linus on Facebook. He's a real helpful guy. Here he is with Scott Burnworth. And I mentioned that because Keith built some really amazing vintage OSA racers for the burner, for Scott Burnworth. You can see him out there with him at some of the races that he sponsors and he puts on. He does a great job with Scott's bikes, and he'll have all the information that you're going to need on your Bing carburetor. So get in touch with Keith. He's going to help you out. What are your thoughts on running pure race gas compared to 50-50 mix? It's easier on my wallet to run 50-50 in my 74 Husky 400. It seems like every week someone has a question on fuel, and I think that's good. Yes, it is better on your wallet to run 50-50. Go out, buy a gallon of race gas. Go out, buy a gallon of Sunoco or whatever the highest grade octane is that you can get at the pump, mix them together, and use that in your bike. There's no need to run pure race gas at this point, I think, in a vintage career. Unless you're racing for a championship, you're like a plus 40 expert guy and everybody's really, really battling it out and you need that edge. I don't think it's necessary anymore. While I'm thinking about this, I want to thank Mark Hildebrand for getting in touch with me earlier this week. Last week there was a question about aviation fuel and race gas. When you buy race gas, when it says 105 octane, that can mean a couple of different things. It means it's, with the government, it could be 103, it could be 106. It's not going to be It may not be exactly 105. It's going to be close. With aviation gas, when they say it's 110, it's 110. It's also a lot more money. So if you're going to buy aviation fuel and you're that much of a stickler about it, when you ask for 110 or whatever aviation fuel is, you're going to get exactly that. Race gas, it's going to vary a little bit. Mark, thanks for getting back to me with that. I really appreciate it. Let's go on to the next question. I'm trying to find the right combination through the air box to get more air into my carburetor. Seems like I've got it, but now I'm finding grit in the box, which I'm sure is entering the carb. Any suggestions? This is from Mike Conley. Mike, I'm thinking that you're talking about your CZ, and yeah, I do have a possible solution to that. This was a Suzuki I restored a while ago, and when I got it, someone had drilled 3 really big holes in the top of the airbox. Out of those holes, I took vents like this, and they're called airbox vents. You can go on, I found them on eBay, I found them on some websites, and they're pretty big. Now, in your CZ airbox, maybe along the top, you can drill the holes and get these pushed into those holes. I think you're going to get the air you're looking for, but you're going to resolve your problem with your grit that's probably getting through your venturi and everything else and maybe messing up your carburetor. You're not going to have that because of the foam inserts that come inside of these inserts, okay? These little foam filters that are inside there. I hope that answers your question, Mike. Thanks for sending it in. Our next question comes from, I finally found the perfect combination for that frosty look on my Kawasaki KX rims, Wes Seeley. Wes did call me the other day. We were having a conversation about this. He's in the process of moving his building and like 70 motorcycles. So he was not able to get me the picture of how his rims look now. He did explain to me what he did. It required him glass beating them, and then he did something else after that and put some kind of coating on them. I'm sure Wes is going to get back to me with the pictures. I want to share this information with you folks again once I get confirmation from Wes about exactly how he did it. So when Wes gets back to me after he makes that crazy move that he's doing, I'll have some pictures and we'll revisit this question. Thanks, Wes. Good luck with your move, brother. I'm using a 1987 Honda CR250 upper fork with 1983 CR250 lowers, and they're topping out. What may be the cause? I don't know about the compatibility of 1983 or 1987 upper forks and 1983 lowers. When people say the fork is topping out, I was showing you before, like on a fork like this. It's when the fork compresses, but when it goes back down, it's going to release and it's going to bang against the bottom of the damper rod like this. Damper rod sits this way inside the fork tube. Maybe you're missing a little spring like this on the bottom of your damper rod. Maybe an 87 doesn't have it, or you're using an 87 upper. Maybe your 83 lower doesn't have that spring on there. I don't know. There could be a bushing. You have a bushing right here. Maybe it's worn out. I'm not really sure. It could be you're not running enough oil. I don't know about the mixing of uppers and lowers on Honda forks, but I can tell you what to look for. You can look for that bushing being a problem. You can look for that spring here being a problem, and maybe that's why you're topping out. Or it could just be something as simple as you're not using the proper volume or viscosity oil in that fork. Thank you for the question. I'm sorry, you emailed or you instant messaged this question to me, and I didn't catch your name. I had the question, but I forgot your name. I'm sorry about that. If you tell me what it is, you get back to me. I'll mention it to the folks next week who actually sent that question in. What do we got next? Joe, I have thoroughly enjoyed your shows. I really appreciate how you share your restoration tips and secrets. Not many people are that forthcoming to help people the way you do. Let's be honest, we could really be funding all that color and product you put in your hair. Teasing aside, my real question is, what brands of bikes do you restore? Do you restore all brands? It's clear you are the finest Elsinore tank restoration specialist on this planet. Is it time? Is it the same with all brands? You know what we got to do here? Who's this from? My friend Rob in Iowa? Let's deal with one thing at a time. You know, Rob, of all the questions I get on Vintage Motocross Q&A, the one I get the most is, how do you keep your hair slicked back like that and always in place? Well, I'm going to share that with you. I use LA Looks. LA Looks. If you want your hair to look like you've just come out of a Scorsese movie or off the red carpet in Hollywood, you want to use LA Looks. It's available at Walmart for about $2. Tell them Joe Moto sent you. Now, what was this question again? Go back a bit. Let's be honest. No, forget about the funding. Oh, teasing aside, a real question is, what brand bike do you restore? Do you restore all brands? I do, but there are some bikes out there that I haven't restored. I've never restored an Osa. I've got some Montesas sitting over there. I've done a Greaves. I've done a Husky. Look, there are so many bikes out there that I have not restored. I've done my share of the Japanese bikes, Hondas, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamahas, of course. Some bikes from Spain, a couple of Bultacos. Which one's my favorite? My next one, I suppose, whichever one that might be. I am a little partial to CZs. There's something about a CZ. I love the way the cases polish up. I love a red frame CZ. It's that frame itself that just sticks, it just jumps right out at you. So I really like CZs. I like the agricultural look of them. And I just love the way CZs look. Makos too. But there isn't really one that I dislike. So whatever brand, whichever one's important to that person, that's the one I'll do. And I really enjoy CZs and Yamahas too. Let's go on with what else Rob had to say. No, Rob had one more thing he had to say something about. Oh, it's clear you are the finest Elsinore tank restoration specialist on this planet. Is it the same with all brands? I'm guessing that you're asking, is it the same with all brand gas tanks? If they're aluminum, yeah, it is. There's not much difference. Some tanks will have a thinner gauge aluminum than others. Elsinores are really nice. They're about 2 millimeters thick. You can really pry on them. You can really stand them a long time. Others you have to be very, very careful with. I did a Suzuki RL Trials tank for a guy down in Texas a few months back. Super thin. Super thin. You had to be so careful. You didn't get many chances at raising the dent, tapping it back down, and sanding it. You had to be very careful with that. I had the same experience with a Yamaha TZ 750 tank one time. Very, very thin. Twice the size of an Elsinore tank and half the weight. But an aluminum tank is an aluminum tank, and I like to approach that pretty much the same way. You say I'm the finest Elsinore tank restoration specialist on the planet. There's a guy named Evan Wilcox up in Washington. He's really good. I really like Evan. He's a great guy. He's also a fabricator. He does a great job on the Elsinore tanks. Does he do as good a job as me? I work through holes about this big when I repair an Elsinore tank. Once that thing's back on the bike, nobody but me and Jesus know that anybody's touched it. Other people take a little bigger chunk out of the inside when they repair it, but they do a beautiful job. So I appreciate the compliment. I'm pretty good at what I do. Other guys are out there doing it too. But thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate it. What do we got next? What's the best source for vintage tires on a restoration? Most manufacturers have either closed or discontinued making what we need. Any advice? Jack Henry Lee. Yes, I have advice for you, Jack. V-Rubber. That's what it's called, V-Rubber. Now, before I go on talking about V-Rubber for a minute, you can go on eBay and you can look for NOS tires or even really, really good used tires for a bike that you're trying to restore. You might pay $400, $500, $600 for one used tire. For a Dunlop from 1974 for a Honda, for a Bridgestone from a 73 Honda, for a Trelleborg for a Husky, or whatever bike you may be restoring. If it's an NOS tire, you can expect to spend a lot. Sometimes you can't find them regardless of price. V-Rubber, number one, they make a really good tire to race on. It's not a poorly made tire by any means, but they also kind of cater to the vintage crowd. They have something called, it's called vintage, what the heck, they had something to do with like wine too, vintage something or other. It's got the word vintage in the title. So what you got to do is go look up V-Rubber on Google. They've got some great products. They've got a tread pattern that looks a lot like the vintage tread patterns. The profile of the tire looks a lot like it does in the old days too. On a lot of their vintage tires, the ones they're aiming toward that market for, they even have the old aspect ratio on it where it might say 418, 321. Not like today where it's going to say 100, 110 or things like that. So look for V-Rubber, shop around, you might find them on eBay or Google them and you'll find V-Rubber distributors. Good question, Jack. Thank you. Who else do we have a question from tonight? That's it? Viewers and vendors we have to go to now. This is something I've really been looking forward to. Our viewers and vendors, this is for you guys out there who have new products that you want to sell. You're a viewer of the show and you make something, you distribute something. It could be like a Mark Hildebrand with his Nightmare Racing plastic. It could be like our friend who's going to be on here tonight featuring his product. His name is Robert Fish, and he has reproduced some amazing things for vintage Yamahas. He calls himself Racer Fish. He's got an email at racerfish at Comcast, and these are some of the restorations that he's done. He's done a great job. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to scoot behind the counter right here. Jordan's going to get a little closer with the camera, and we're going to show you a little bit more about Racer Fish and what he's doing to help the guys on the vintage scene with Yamaha YZ and MX models. And they also fit some of the IT stuff as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this right here. Robert's also got some prototype tank adapters that he's working on. And he's got this cool Racer Fish sticker that he sent me. Now, if you go down this lineup over here, I'm going to read to you what Rob has sent me, and we'll know a little bit more about it. The first thing I want to mention is this billet clutch basket. This thing is amazing. It weighs mere ounces. And he makes them for the 1977 to 1983 YZ100, 125. It also fits the 175 MX, IT, and YZ. It comes with this adapter plate. It's got these little shoulder things that go into the adapter plate. It's got the rubber bushings that fit in this oblong section of the basket, and you can adapt it to your old gear. It comes with wonderful instructions on how to get this thing to fit your bike. He also makes it for a 77 to 81 250, 400 and 465, IT and YZ, and the 82 490. Prices range from $220 to $245. They also, only the kits include the urethane bushings. For an additional $30, if a customer ships Rob the basket, he'll machine off and remove the factory rivets and reassemble the whole basket for you. Customer pays shipping both ways, of course. You can catch him again at Racerfish at Comcast.net. He's built a lot of ground up restorations or rebuild, over 20 from between 1975 and 1988. He's very, very knowledgeable on these things. He takes PayPal and he ships via UPS. The thing that interested me were some of these axles that he's made. He's made a large axle for an 81 YZ 250 465, the medium for the 78 through 80 250 400 465, small axles for the 79 125, and the long pivot bolt for the 78 through 81 250 400. He also makes a short pivot bolt. These things are beautiful, extremely well made. The thread cut is absolutely perfect. The ends are absolutely amazing. Such a well-built bolt. It's just a great thing to be able to replace your worn out and tired stuff on your old YZs and your MXs. The nice thing about this too is it's got a military grade black oxide finish. You want me to tell you about military grade black oxide? I'll have to look it up on Google and tell you about it next week. I don't really know that much all about it, but Robert tells me it's exceptionally hard and durable, and he puts it on all the things that he's making these days. The axles and the pivot nuts don't come, the axles and the pivot bolts, they don't come with nuts, but the nuts are available for $10 more. As he mentioned, many of the parts fit MX and IT models as well. I think I've mentioned most of these items, but I do want to just pick up a couple and show you a little more. These are the pivot section that goes on the shock of a monoshock on the rear of the bike. He does a beautiful job on these with the brass bushings. These are for tank mounts on certain models. Look at the way he has machined out this little piece right here. How beautiful that thing fits. You'd be proud to have that on your bike. He's got chain guide blocks. He's made out of Delrin, which are absolutely beautiful. He's got the cable guides with the steel piece. These are nice to replace worn out stuff on your bike. I mean, this is restoration quality stuff. Beautiful seat brackets he's made. Comes with the mount for the front too. We've got some more chain guide stuff right here. Again, with this beautiful black oxide finish on it. Robert Fish, I want to thank you for sending me all this wonderful stuff for the YZ. You are certainly an asset to the vintage motocross community with everything you're making here. I'm going to get it all back in a box to you and get it shipped to you. Just remember, you owe me a week's worth of videos on your page. I'm going to send you a video about Vmxq&A, Vintage Motocross Question and Answer, the one we have here. I'll make a video, I'll put it up, you put it on your page, and that's kind of our quid pro quo deal. Thanks for sending me the stuff. I'm going to come back around the other way. We're going to finish up now with our last segment of the show this evening. I want to thank, of course, Jordan Woodworth for being here, and my lovely wife, Susie, for being here along with me as well. I want to mention that Jordan is quite an accomplished racer too. He went racing the last 2 weeks. He was up in Bushy Ranch 2 weeks ago, where he won his class in a cross-country race on an amazing 440 Mako. Last week, he took him to school over at the Coupe Classic in Marysville. And this week, he says he's bringing his act down to Glen Helen, him and the mighty 440 Mako. Look out for Jordan Whitworth. He's coming down, and he's coming after you. Jordan, thanks for helping me every week. He does a great job. Oh, some of the viewers that we have here tonight. Ken Kaplan, Mike Breschers, Jack Henry Lee, Bruce Lee Phillips, Mark H. I'm guessing that's Mark Hildebrand. Brian Taylor, Philip Liberty. You shared my video. Great. Brian McGuire, Mike Conley. My daughter-in-law, Danielle Benaldi. Yeah. I love you, Danielle. Happy birthday. The other day it was your birthday. Christopher Ty Corm, Robert Leidies. Hey, Robert. Thanks for tuning in. And we've got about 49 watchers tonight, including Jim Jenkins, Rich Clark, Brian Taylor, John Roger, George Lucas, Ray Bennett, Marlon Phillips from Legends and Heroes fame. Marlon Phillips is here. Tony Mosley. That's amazing. That's wonderful. We also have John Nastro, Mike Oppenheis, and Tom Daw. That's really wonderful. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And hopefully you'll come back next week too. We're going to continue on doing this. Again, I am thinking about changing it to Wednesdays, and I'll tell you why. Steve Wise has a live feed on just about the same time I do. It isn't a matter of me changing because I don't want to conflict with Steve Wise. I actually like Steve Wise's show. It's called Moto Church. He tells some great stories at the beginning of his show, and the second half hour, he does some excerpts out of the Bible, talks about some passages, talks about salvation, things I really enjoy hearing about, and I know a lot of my viewers here do too. So, the reason why I'm thinking about changing, I want to be able to catch Steve Wise's show at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays. That's why I may change Vintage Motocross Q&A to Wednesdays. Announcements. Here's what I want to announce. Number one, I want you, if you have events coming up for your race club, if you have an event, a bike show, a swap meet, anything like that coming up, send it in to me. Send it to me in the inbox at Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'll make a little thing for it, or if you have a flyer, send that with it. I'll get it up in the announcements so people know about the event that you're going to have coming up. Send me that info. Keep it coming in. Keep the questions coming in too. I really need them. That really, really makes the show special when we can get questions on and comments from viewers, and we can have them up on the screen, and we can have some dialogue about that. I think we have a race coming up this weekend that I wanted to talk about. It's down in Glen Helen. The Old School Scrambles Racing Group, the Oktoberfest GP at Glen Helen. That's coming up this weekend. Is that a two-day event, Jordan? Saturday and Sunday?
Saturday practice, Sunday race.
Saturday practice, Sunday race. A very dear friend of mine puts this race on, Tammy Greenhill. She's a wonderful gal, been around motocross all of her life. Her and her husband, Ralph, they do a lot of promoting. They do a lot for the sport. So if you can get down to Glen Helen this weekend, go to the OSSRG, Old School Scrambles Racing Group. This is where Jordan's coming down this weekend. Beware, the Woodworth will be in the house. So get down there. Send Tammy my regards if you see her. Get down there, support the group. And I think that's it for this evening. I want to thank you all for watching Vintage Motocross Q&A. Please join us next week. You can always watch a rebroadcast. You can share this video. That's always welcome. Thanks again to Jordan Whitworth, my wonderful wife Sue, and for you people joining me every week on Vintage Motocross Q&A. Thank you. Have a good night.